Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming to our 2025, our first severe weather activation in terms of opening emergency shelters. We're really grateful to Transition Projects, who is going to be operating the site tonight. We're going to hear today from Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega Peterson, from City of Portland Mayor Keith Wilson, Nikki Ferguson, who is the Vice President of Shelters at Transition Projects, and then Chris Voss, the man you know well, Emergency Management Director at Multnomah County. Afterward, we'll have a few minutes for questions, and if you'll just say your outlet before you start, and then we'll let the proper person respond. So with that, I will turn it over to Chair Jessica Vega Peterson.
Hi, good afternoon. Okay, there we go. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. Today, I am declaring an emergency for Multnomah County that begins at 6 p.m. tonight and runs through at least 6 p.m. tomorrow. Our goal is to provide support for folks to stay safe, warm, and cared for as winter weather hits our community. This declaration gives the county additional ability to quickly mobilize resources in the face of cold and potentially snowy weather. County Emergency Management will be able to take all steps to coordinate response and recovery, state support as needed, and pull together all of these resources. We have been preparing for severe weather for months by procuring supplies, training volunteers, running emergency management scenarios, and increasing the strength of our communications with partners, including the City of Portland. In addition to the enhanced outreach work that's been happening over the last 3 weeks under cold weather conditions, our severe weather response fully began last week with daily emergency management calls attended by more than 100 partners across our region working together to make decisions and keep each other informed. Though conditions over the weekend were milder than expected, there has been a slight uptick recently in cold weather EMS and emergency room engagements. And in consultation with partners and experts, we are seeing conditions that now meet our thresholds. Multnomah County will open warming shelters tonight, Tuesday, February 4th, at these locations. So this location where we are now, the Hollywood Shelter at 1815 Northeast 43rd Street in Portland, Cook Plaza at 19421 Southeast Stark Street in Gresham, Northwest 14th Avenue Shelter at 600 Northwest 14th Avenue in Portland. There will be about 360 beds open tonight. That also includes the extended hours at our Salvation Army Shelter so that those beds will support people until at least noon tomorrow. As of today, the Salvation Army's winter beds still have room for people seeking shelter. I want to thank Mayor Wilson for his partnership in this weather response and the city's partnership on those Salvation Army beds, which have helped us make sure that people are able to stay warm overnight throughout this recent cold snap. They will continue to be such an important resource for folks throughout this winter. All of these shelters will be open at least until noon tomorrow, and we will reassess the need to extend or provide additional shelter first thing tomorrow morning. Temperatures may be especially cold in East County and East Portland. Frostbite in these temperatures could set in less than 1 hour of being outdoors. This will make conditions much worse for anyone without adequate shelter, so we ask people to please seek shelter as soon as possible. The latest National Weather Service forecast shows the chance that our region could be hit with a longer stretch of severe winter weather, with conditions potentially worsening, so we will be monitoring that very closely. Severe weather shelters, we know they save lives during the coldest and harshest nights of the year. No one will be turned away, so if you need a place to go and stay warm, know that we are here for you. I will also like to say transportation is available. Fares are already free on TriMet today to help this community celebrate Rosa Parks' birthday. So happy birthday, Ms. Parks, and thank you for your legacy of civil rights in this country. Fares will continue to be free on TriMet throughout this winter weather emergency for anyone who needs shelter. We will also be working to provide 24/7 transport to shelters throughout Multnomah County. Our emergency medical response system has moved to emergency weather authorizations to ensure that the highest quality pre-hospital patient care as we are sending ambulances to the nearest hospital. I am so gratified by our response from the Multnomah County and City of Portland workforces and the hundreds of people who have responded to our call to sign up for emergency sheltering shifts. Your commitment to our community means that the additional sheltering locations that we open today, which add to the more than 3,200 shelter beds open every night, have the people power we need to get through this winter weather event. You can also count on us to continue to monitor the weather carefully and to continue to prepare and stand up the resources that this community will need. I want everybody who's watching to know that there are things that you can do to help. Please be cautious with travel and stay out of the cold tonight. Be prepared for a possible snow event and continued cold weather tomorrow and throughout the week. Check on your neighbors, especially elderly or vulnerable neighbors and loved ones, to make sure that they have what they need to weather this storm. Your care and support can and does directly save lives. We'll keep you updated about shelter, transportation, outreach, and other services on an ongoing basis throughout the next several days. We may reach out to this community to volunteer and to help us get through this challenging time. We will be in touch more specifically when we could use your time and talent as a volunteer to provide direct services to our neighbors in need. For updates, please follow us on social media or check out the county's Care for When It's Cold website, which is multco.us/cold. That's multco.us/cold. This is where we'll update the community on our needs throughout this emergency, so you can check that often. And please, take good care of yourselves and each other during this time. Now, I'd like to turn this podium over to Mayor Wilson, who will have more information about the city's response. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you all for coming on such short notice. It's so important to get this information out to our community as rapidly as we can, so thank you. On Wednesday morning, we were expecting the first snow of the season in Portland, and we've had warnings of potential snow for several days. Chair Vega-Peterson and I have been meeting with the emergency response or command center over this last many days, monitoring the situation. Today is the day for last-minute preparations. The city and county have been working in partnership to meet the needs of the community. The 200 Salvation Army shelter beds at Safes on Birdside and Moore Street Shelter that were stood up a few weeks ago still have capacity. Individuals can call 311 for additional shelter information as well as transportation to those shelters. We have to take this event very seriously. We've lost 3 people on the streets of Portland this last 3 weeks to hypothermia. And so I'm asking each and every one of you, if you see somebody in distress, that's our moment to stop, provide that care, and offer of shelter and or use the 311 as that capacity. And as you've heard Chair Vega-Peterson, she and I are setting up additional capacity for those in need. In addition, the Portland Bureau of Transportation is activated for winter weather response and is working around the clock. Last night, PBOT crews placed 8,000 gallons of liquid anti-icer on Portland streets, and they're ready for the potential for snow during tomorrow morning's commute. If you're driving on Wednesday morning, use extreme caution. Drive for the conditions you see in real time. Coming over the Fremont Bridge early this morning, it was a roller skating rink and cars were hitting the sides of the barriers. And so I want to just caution you, also check the routes that you're traveling on and use extreme caution. If snow plowing is required, PBOT will prioritize emergency routes and major arterials first. And PBOT is in close coordination with shelter operations to ensure access to those sites. First responders from Portland Fire and Rescue want to remind you that ice can be deadly. Ice can build up on trees and power lines and bring power lines to the ground. If you see any power lines on the ground, always assume they are active and avoid contact. This type of weather can rupture water pipes in your homes. Learn how to avoid frozen pipes in your home. Cover outdoor hose bibs, and take a moment to locate the water shutoff valves to reduce damage in case there is a break. Use extra caution on icy walkways, and be prepared to keep your sidewalk passable by shoveling or using ice melts as needed. If you need shelter or information, then please call 211. Let's all check on our neighbors, let's help each other out, and get through these chilly upcoming days safely together. Thank you. Do we have questions or?
We're gonna turn it over.
Thank you.
So we're gonna hear from Nikki Ferguson, Vice President of Shelters at Transition Projects.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I just want to thank you all for being here, and I want to say Transition Projects provides services for individuals 365 days of the year through 8 shelters where we provide 703 beds. During severe weather on our most deadliest nights of the year, we, in addition, provide another 65 shelter beds and can expand as needed for folks that want to come inside. I really want to encourage people, if you know somebody that is living unsheltered and outside, please reach out to them, encourage them to call 211. Please encourage them to seek shelter during this time. When the weather has dropped below a certain degrees, below 25 degrees, and it's wet outside, people are at risk of hypothermia and are likely to, not survive the conditions. So we really want to encourage those that are living outside to come inside. We really want to encourage people to seek shelter, and we really want to encourage people to stay safe. So every person in our community counts, and please encourage them to seek services. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Chris Voss, Emergency Management Director of Multnomah County.
Well, thank you, and much has already been said, so there's really only 2 points that you've heard, but I really want to hammer home. And that is, 1, we really need the community to be the eyes and ears. If you see someone or if you know someone that needs assistance, please encourage them to seek assistance. And when you're doing that, have them call 211. It's the best resource. Those folks can assess that person. They could help them with transportation and let them know where the closest transport is. There's a lot of partners that do this work. There's the county, the city. We work closely with utilities and TriMet, all these organizations. But at the end of the day, I do think it's the community that can have maybe the greatest impact by encouraging people to seek assistance. So thank you.
Great. We're gonna take some questions now, but I wanna clarify, because of course the mayor doesn't have always have in between his travels the latest news. But I wanted to clarify about the hypothermia deaths. So there have been reports of deaths. Those are still under investigation. At least one has been determined not to be a hypothermia case, but there are a couple that are still outstanding. Here is our agreement with the community. The medical examiner, when a state of emergency is declared, the medical examiner meets with us every day at 4:00 and tells us so we can let the community know. Those conditions haven't been met yet. They are still under investigation, and knowing that people, we don't want to give false information. At the same time, we of course don't want to downplay the risk. So if you'll bear with us, when we have suspected hypothermia cases we can talk about, we will share those with the community. And with that, I'd like to open it up for questions. If you can tell us your outlet, say your name, and we'll try to repeat the question and have the mayor and chair and others answer. Go ahead.
Can you clarify on that
Yes.
specific thing that you were just saying? So there's been 3 deaths under investigation, but 1 is already determined not to be.
There were actually 4. One was not, and for sure. And the others, it's too early to tell whether they would be considered. Yes.
So we have 3 suspected hypothermia.
No, they're under investigation to be determined if they are suspected. They have not been confirmed. Mhm. So that's a weird line. Yes, it is a line. It goes to the state medical examiner. There's a back and forth. So we always apologize. We try to expedite it during the emergency, and we will be sharing news releases when we have information. For sure. Go ahead.
And then with regard to people being discharged from hospitals, are you communicating with hospitals which emergency shelters are open? Are you making sure that they know that there's this free transport where people can go to those shelters? I know that there's work being done with hospital discharge right now at the legislative level, but as far as the county goes in emergency planning, are you communicating with your hospital partners?
Yeah. Chris, would you like to take that?
Sure. So you heard, we have calls where literally there are well over 100 organizations and people on these calls, including the health department and people that work very closely with a lot of our health organizations. But yeah, it is very common when we have these locations open that we also may see people that are brought from medical institutions to the shelter to seek assistance. So it does happen.
Specifically, has the county communicated to hospitals in the county about which emergency shelters are open?
You know what? I know we've communicated with the health department. That is typically the direct point to our hospitals. But I will double check, but I'm sure that that connection has been made.
Great. Lillian, were you next? Is that, oh, okay. Joanne.
Joelle Jones with Point 6 News, and my question is for Chris Voss, or really anybody, but you mentioned, we heard a lot about the emergency visits, and I know that that's something that you mentioned during the presentation for the SCP. What's the status of the number of emergency visits as it relates to cold weather impacts? What are we seeing on the ground this year, maybe compared to last year?
Sure. So over the last few days, we've actually seen pretty normal, and there's three things that we typically look at. We'll look at sort of in general, our 911 calls average. We'll look at specifically EMS transports for cold, and we'll also look at ED visits for cold. And a lot of them have been very much in the normal range. And that has been true. There have been some days a little elevated, but actually EMS transports have been pretty much consistent, normal. I think one of the reasons why we're here today is because there are a lot of people that we bring in to make sure that we're making an informed decision on if we need shelters. And so this morning on an early morning call when the health department says, hey, we have some elevated and some additional EMS calls. In a typical day, we might see one or two, and last night between midnight and 7 a.m., I believe they had 5. It may not be statistically significant, but it was enough for us to say, hey, listen, the ground situation is such that we may be seeing more of this. We're going to see a little bit more cold, a little bit more snow, and a little bit more rain. So it's probably prudent that with that and other information that we take a step forward, which is open these types of shelters. But that information is critical for us. What we see on the ground very much influences the way that we feel like we have to work to protect the community.
You're back up front. Oh, sorry. Can we go here and
Yeah,
then we'll
of
come
course,
back to you?
thanks.
Go ahead.
This one's probably
Blair.
for the chair, Blair with KBW. What do you have to say to people that look at the thresholds for when you open these shelters as being way too strict? I mean, we're already seeing deaths being investigated for hypothermia dating back to even a couple of weeks ago. So why now, and why are we holding on to these strict thresholds?
So we base our thresholds on what makes the most sense from a medical response perspective, right? Chris just talked about the importance of keeping an eye on EMS calls and emergency department uses and all that. The thresholds are reviewed about every 18 months, and we do that in partnership with the city of Portland. We do have different thresholds than our neighboring counties, but I will say that on an average night, we also have about 3,200 shelter beds that are open throughout Multnomah County. If you look at Washington County, they have about 400. If you look at Clackamas County, they have about 200. So on a regular basis, we have more options open. And as you've heard, we do actually have open beds in the overnight shelters that are open. So what we do want to make sure is on those coldest, harshest nights of the year, we are opening the emergency shelters, the winter severe weather shelters, so that people can come out of the cold. This really is about saving people's lives and making sure we have those resources available. So even though, we were really watching closely about the thresholds, we know that there's been cold weather over the last couple of weeks that has a cumulative effects. We saw some of those numbers go up in terms of ambulance and emergency room visits, and we wanted to be responsive for that. So as I said, the shelters are open tonight. We will look at the weather, follow it closely. We'll keep those open till noon because we're expecting the snowy weather to come in the morning. And then we'll make a decision early tomorrow morning about if we need to continue that based on the most updated weather reports.
Great. Go ahead. No, go back.
Lillian Mondra Hughes, Oregonian. I am curious about the number of beds. If it's going to be about 240 added, and I know there are some available of the 3,000, I know there are also some available of the new ones open. That still doesn't meet the total number of people living unsheltered in Portland. It's just over half of the beds that you would need to meet that goal. And can someone speak to how you decided?
Sure. this is night one. We don't know necessarily if there'll be a night two, but on night one, we track these events year over year. And so we've been in a lot of conversations on the number of people that we would likely see on night one. But I also want to sort of make note that there have been times where we've seen more people. And guess what? We open more locations. As you heard the chair say, we've been really fortunate in the years that we've been running this program that we haven't turned anybody away when we've reached these thresholds. If we need more locations, we open more locations and we accommodate additional folks. Last year's, our final number for that January was 1,356 people we sheltered. The year before, we did over 1,250 people. So if this event goes days, we know we will see more people, we will add additional locations and we will continue to house the people that need housing.
Yeah, you know, we have heard that you don't turn anyone away, but I have heard stories where people end up having to get banned or sent away from a shelter because of behavior-related incidents. Maybe this is a transition project question, but can you talk about how you handle those situations and then what you do in those situations to make sure the person with behavioral issues still doesn't die on the streets?
Yeah, in shelters we often see behavioral issues. We do reach out to the Portland response team. We will reach out to mental health services that we have. We reach out to Unity Health. We try to get services to people, and we also understand that the folks that are in shelter are struggling. They're experiencing trauma. We know that the behavior that they are showing is really a response to the trauma that they are experiencing. And so we also train our staff to show up and support these individuals. I myself am on call. The director of shelters is on call, Duncan Anderson for TPI. We really try to work with individuals. We don't want to send people away from shelter for having behavioral issues. And if we are sending them away, we want to be able to send them to Unity or the emergency room where people can get services for what they need. We don't want to put people out in the cold because the goal is to save lives. That's what Transition Projects does. We want to bring people inside. We want to keep them safe. We want to keep them warm. If somebody needs space, if somebody needs to talk to somebody, if somebody just needs to get some help bridging the gap for resources, we want to provide those services to them.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention is that, we have shelter shifts that folks can sign up for, but we also have some specialty staffing positions, which are some behavioral health, some medical related, person in charge shifts. So we do look to have resources on site at shelters as we're opening these up, knowing that we have varying needs throughout the community.
Great. So we really appreciate you coming down. We will, as I said, you'll be getting regular updates for us. If there are people, you see a lot of communications people here. If you have additional questions, you can send them to pressoffice@meltco.us. And of course, the City of Portland staff is here. Any final words, Dylan? Any final thing you'd like to say? You're good.
There's one-on-ones.
Okay, you can do one-on-ones, Mayor?
Yeah, good,
Okay,
thank you.
good enough. Thanks again, everybody, for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you all.